It's good to have you on again, brother. For context, Baldfather Betts and I text maybe not daily, but close to daily about college football. And this is one of the days, Saturday at the time we're recording this, where he could come on and talk to us for about an hour about all things college football. So I'm college football with Sam, obviously. This is Baldfather Betts. Make sure to check out his content on YouTube. Give him a subscribe, like his most recent video, watch his recent things so you can get an idea of what he does. He covers more the betting side of college football and also the NFL. So if you're interested in that, check out his stuff. How are you doing? Just not just today, but in general.
Yeah, man, doing well. Doing well. Off season is fun. You get to take a breather, right? After had another successful season in terms of the betting wise this past year. Off season's fun. I'm kind of in that mode right now where I'm letting all the spring camps finish, and then I'll probably come out with something soon on college football futures. I mean, I already have like an idea of where we're looking, like where we see value. And then right after that, then the NFL draft will finish at the end of April, and then we'll look at NFL futures. I don't like to get too ahead of myself when it comes to those. Obviously, in the previous couple of years with college, you definitely couldn't get too ahead of yourself with spring because you still had that spring transfer window. Now that you don't have the spring transfer window, you at least can have a little bit more of an idea. But I like to see the spring camps finish before I kind of start to lock in where I'm looking at it from a future standpoint. And then NFL, you can't do that before the draft because you really need to understand what teams plug certain holes, where quarterbacks go, things like that, and then you can move forward.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And despite the spring portal window ceasing to exist, which I think is a good thing, by the way, I
I
think
agree. I
coaches
agree.
will be able to coach their players harder. You have more continuity. It's just more of how things used to be while retaining some of the new things that are good. It is late March, and I have no idea who I'm going to pick to win it all. Maybe I shouldn't go that far. There are a few teams, but there's no one who's clearly, jumping out. There's no that meme of the bodybuilders where they're all tanned and ripped, and then there's that one guy who stands out because he didn't do any work.
Hmm.
There's no one standing out. No one so far. So I'm curious to get your thoughts in this segment about some teams at the top. But we all know that Texas is viewed as one of those teams at the top this year. They're tied for second in national title odds right now per FanDuel with Notre Dame behind Ohio State at number one. They play Ohio State in week 2 and play one of the toughest schedules I think I've ever seen, not just for this season, but in recent seasons. Um, just tell us your general thoughts about Texas, and from there, we'll dive a bit deeper.
Yeah. I think last year when I came on sometime around this time, maybe a little bit later, we did, Texas preseason. And I voiced mainly cautious optimism because I was not on the number one team overall train heading into last season. I thought they were one of a very select group that could have won the national title. When we got to kickoff, I think I told you I thought Texas or Ohio State would ultimately win it.
You did. I remember that clearly.
I got the most talent. I got the best team right, which was Ohio State. They didn't win it all, but they were the best team last year. And then Texas by the end of the season was in that top 10 category for best teams. But the cautious optimism, there's a reason I was cautious, and it had a lot to do with the offense coming into the season. And I think specifically, I remember this from the video. I said one thing people took for granted with Quinn Ewers was short to medium range accuracy. And it's not something that you notice as a fan when things are going right, but as soon as it's not going right, you notice it right away. And short to medium range accuracy in the beginning of the season plagued Texas. It cost them the game against Ohio State for sure. Um, and then after that, you could argue it cost them the game against Florida. I would argue there were other factors that cost them the game against Florida. But compared to last season, where I was a little bit more cautious optimism with Texas heading into the preseason, this year, like, I'm also kind of following along with what the Texas team is kind of toting, and it's a national championship or bust type feeling with Texas. So when you go through, like, you're looking at the roster, and Texas, you go to the Texas Athletic website and they do the roster in terms of numbers, and you're in the single digit numbers, and you're going through and you're like NFL, 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 and you haven't even made it to 10 yet. You haven't even made it to the double digit roster numbers, and it's just so loaded. It's so loaded from top to bottom. It has. I'm pretty big believer that even if he were to tear his ACL week one, Arch would be round one, pick one, and we've had this conversation. In next year's draft, I think it would be something insane would have to happen. You'd have to have a Fernando Mendoza come out of nowhere just to take it from him. If you look at how they were playing at the end of the season, outside of, and I'm going to say maybe, and because I could make an argument both ways, maybe outside of Fernando Mendoza, Arch Manning was the best quarterback in college football at the end of the season last year. And again, I could make the argument that Arch was better than Mendoza. I could also make the argument that Mendoza was better than Arch, like, both ways. So that's why I say that one's a little bit more of a debate. But you have that. Then you have what they brought in terms of the transfer portal on offense with everyone obviously knows Cam Coleman, Smothers, and Brown. And then this week, they just got the offensive guard Seymour was approved for his 6 year of eligibility, which was kind of the last spot on the offensive line from a starter standpoint that they needed to shore up. And then what is lost on people, though, is kind of what they brought in on the defensive side, especially with Biles at linebacker, with the loss of Anthony Hill Jr. being such a big one. Biles is a different player. It's not a 1-for-1 swap. Biles is much smaller. He's a lot more instinctive of a player. He gets more turnovers. He forces a lot of turnovers because he's extremely instinctive, actually. But then also that can hurt you sometimes. And then, like, Bo Masco and stuff on the at corner, they're just loaded. Like, they're just loaded from top to bottom. The defensive line reminds me a lot more of 2024 than it did of 2025 headed into last year in terms of just the number of overall bodies that they're going to have to rotate through, which is when Texas is at its best from a defensive line standpoint. And then I waited till the last bit in terms of talking about this, but Colin Simmons is one of the best college football pass rushers I've seen, and I can make an argument pro firing PK for Muschamp, and I can make an argument against it. One of the things that I would make in the argument for pro is it is definitely a better system for a pass rusher like Colin Simmons. There were too many times in PK's system where Simmons was dropping back into coverage. That's not what you want a top 5 edge rusher, NFL draft edge rusher to be doing that much. And I want to make sure I caveat this. I'm a big PK fan. I'm a big PK fan. We've talked about, like, what I think of him as a defensive coordinator. He runs a more Knowles-like system. You know what I think of Jim Knowles, where it's not as aggressive. And when it's not as aggressive, there's certain things that come with that. One of the things that can hurt you on is when you have someone like a Colin Simmons, who is generational in terms of their ability and needs to play in an aggressive system and needs to play free and needs to play downhill, thoroughbred, running forward all the time and not going backwards. So you look at what Colin Simmons can do. I mean, the team is loaded from top to bottom. There's a couple of things that factor into then how I think they ultimately could do. Because we're going to talk a little bit about this when I think we're going to talk about futures and titles odds and stuff like that. it's funny because as I talk about that, I'm going to say two things. There's two teams that are so far loaded above the rest of the country when it comes to roster talent. They're Texas and Oregon, and no one else is in their class. If you look at the Texas schedule, though, a decent bet is Texas under their win total of 9.5 and to go 9-3. And if they go 9-3, then they're not going to make the playoff, right? But they play such a difficult schedule that missing the playoff for the team and going 9-3 isn't something that's out of possibility at all.
Yeah, it's so strange, but one of the fun things. See, what I hate about the CFP committee so much is that these super conference schedules plus quality non-conference games would give you some of the most entertaining schedules of all time, where every week you could have top tier matchups, and that would balance out chaos that everyone wants with high quality football that everyone wants. It'd kind of make it what you've told me and what I've witnessed a little bit when I watched the NFL more last year, what the NFL is, where you don't always know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas has that this year. They also have the loaded roster. I think a lot of people underrate how, good of a tackle duo Gooseby and Saini should be compared to what it was last year, where you had Gooseby. He was the best offensive lineman, right, by a mile.
Yeah,
for Texas.
First team all SEC. Yeah, at left tackle.
Yeah, and probably will be tackle one in next year's draft, or close to that.
It's close to it. Yeah, we'll be a first rounder. We'll be a first rounder. Yeah.
Yeah, and the difference between what this offensive line could be versus what last year's was for much of the year can be such a difference maker with a better running back group, with a QB that now understands what it's like to play under pressure constantly. I'm really excited for Texas, but let's get into this loaded schedule a bit before moving on to other teams. What is your biggest concern about this schedule? And if there is one game on the schedule that you think could, cause the team to jolt and go on this amazing win streak, or that could break them a bit, what would that game be?
Yeah. Okay. So in discussing the schedule, the something I think that's super important about it is you're looking at the offenses that they're playing, and then you're looking at the defenses that they're playing. I'm going to say that very specifically for a reason. I think it has a lot to do with then why the change to Muschamp was made this year. Okay. So you're looking at the teams that they're playing, and I'm going to then focus on the offenses. Okay. You're going to play Ohio State with Sayin at quarterback. You're going to play LSU with Levitt at quarterback. You're going to play Ole Miss with Chambliss at quarterback. Okay. You're going to play Florida with an improved offense and Philo at quarterback. You're going to play Marcel Reed and Texas A&M. You're going to play OU with John Mateer at quarterback. Okay. And then you're going to play Tennessee's offense, which no, people don't have their quarterback in like that class right now. We'll see how things go, and I have a little bit of a trust with Heupel when it comes to that. Okay, so if you told me at the beginning of the season, hey, Texas is the number 14th ranked overall defense in 2026, would you take it? My answer would be yes, because of the quarterbacks that they're playing. What has to come with that, though, is you have to have takeaways and you have to have third down stops at key points, which is something that is, when you have an aggressive scheme like Muschamp brings, and think 2023 Georgia when he was the defensive coordinator at Georgia, that's kind of what they're wanting to see. And they're wanting to see third down sacks. They're wanting to see interceptions, fumbles, etc., because you're not going to stop those offenses throughout the whole game. Those quarterbacks are too good. Those play callers are too good. Those offenses are too loaded as you're coming into the season. Okay?
Absolutely.
Then let's go to the flip side of this. What's a little bit lost in how difficult Texas's schedule is, because I see a lot of people saying it's number 1 overall or number 2 overall. The defenses that they're playing are a little susceptible, especially in the secondary. Okay. And you look at Steve Sarkisian's offenses, right? Talking 2019 Alabama, 2020 Alabama, now his offenses since he's been at Texas. The thing that makes or breaks a Steve Sarkisian offense is explosive plays. So I'm going to define them as 20 yards or more. Okay. In last year's team, in 2024, Texas was number 1 overall in explosive plays. And you maybe not think of that. 2024 was a down year for offenses across the board. The number 1 team points per play was Miami, and they didn't break 0.6. They were in the 0.57 region. But overall explosive plays, Texas was number 1. And you don't think of 2024 as being this incredible offense for Texas. You think more of 23 as being the better offensive team. But the thing that did it for Texas was the explosive plays. That's what gave them the win against Arizona State. It's what kept them in the game against Ohio State when it was 1st and goal at the 1 and they had a chance to tie it, where the 2 explosive plays to Jaden Blue with touchdowns in the corner. It's how they tied the game up against Georgia with the explosive play on the slant to DeAndre Moore. It is the emphasis of his team. So last year, when Texas had an explosive play, so 20 yards or more in a drive, they had a score rate of 70% and they had a touchdown rate of 50%, and they were right around 4.5 points per drive. On drives where they did not, they had a score rate of low 20%, and they had a touchdown rate of 10 to 11%, and they were right around 1 point per drive. 4.5 points per drive would have been the number 1 offense in the country. 1 point some odd was in the 100 range. So Sark's offense is absolutely make or break when it comes to the explosive play. And if you go back and you look at 2019 Alabama and 2020 Alabama, it was very, very similar. No one's going to say Sark is this short yardage tactician. No one's ever made that statement about him. No one's ever said that his offenses are the most disciplined. They get penalties. And no one's, outside of 2021, when he had Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, no one has ever said that he's great in red zone either. What he is amazing at is explosive plays, scheming people up and hitting enough of those to where he can get you 28 points, never even touching the red zone, and the game's over at that point. So this offense, with the defenses that they're going up against, has an opportunity in terms of points per play to be at that 0.675 margin. And when you're at that margin, you're talking about 2019 Alabama, or people don't know this, but 2019 Alabama averaged more points per play than 2019 LSU. But in that region, 2020 Alabama, they were all at that 0.68 and above. When you look at Notre Dame last year, they were in the 0.62, 0.64, something like that. This offense has an opportunity to be at 0.65. If the explosive play hits and they can then unlock one other thing. I think the one other thing you unlock with this offense is QB run game, because of how good Arch is. Think about the touchdown run to seal it against Texas A&M in the last game of the season.
The whole Michigan game.
The touchdown run to seal it against Michigan in the bowl game. If you unlock the QB run game and the offense is explosive, they're in the top 5 in the country for explosive plays, then you hit that ability with how loaded they are. Cam Coleman on the outside the fact that Sark isn't that great of a red zone play caller, well, fades to Cam Coleman can rescue that a lot. Arch's legs down in the red zone can rescue that a lot. How explosive Raleek Brown is can rescue that a lot. How good Ryan Wingo is, Yak. People like to call him a Yak Daddy. That absolutely can rescue that a lot. And then that doesn't even take into account like some of the things what we've been seeing under Jermaine Bishop and some of the newcomers in spring. Derek Cooper, right? And some of the newcomers in spring. So the offense has a chance to be #1 overall in the country next year, which is why I would take it if you told me Texas can be 13th or 14th best defense in the country, because I think that's enough to get them 10-2 headed into, and 10-2 will get you in the playoff with their schedule and with SEC. You and I are a little bit different in that I don't think in a 12, because I'm seeing Notre Dame is an automatic lock for the playoff with their schedule, and then the rule now that if they're in the top 12, they're in. Texas Tech is in, and I think you're going to have one other Big 12 team in between BYU and Oklahoma State. So that's 3 spots there. Then you have the ACC automatic qualifier, right? I don't think there's going to be enough at-large spots for these really, really good 9-3 teams to get in. So I think Texas has to go 10-2. And I think if they have the number one offense in the country, and they're in that mid-teens range on defense, they will have done it. When it comes to the schedule, in terms of, I'll give you the game that I think makes me the most nervous, than the game that could like kind of unlock things moving forward. So one of the positive things about the schedule is until November, they only leave the state of Texas once. And that includes the non-conference game against Oklahoma. A lot like last year, because the Ohio State game's a toss-up. It was a toss-up last year. It's a toss-up this year. They're either going to win or they're going to lose. Complete toss-up. If you had to give an edge to someone because they're at home, you would give Texas the edge, and it will be ABC primetime. It'll be a night game. That helps things a little bit. And Ohio State loses so much more on defense, I think, than any of the 4. Texas offense, Texas defense, Ohio State offense, Ohio State defense. What Ohio State loses on defense, it's the most that they have to replace.
Yes.
So they're going to get through that. That's in the non-con, and then they go to Tennessee. That's the one game outside of the state of Texas in the beginning. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on that one, with what Heupel's having to replace in terms of his team, and the fact that Joey Aguilar is not getting it didn't get another year of eligibility, and the fact that it takes these Jim Knowles defenses time to kind of get going. And this is going to be their first SEC game of the season, and it's against Arch Manning in this offense that we just talked about, who has a chance to be #1 overall in the country. Okay, so they get through that. Then when they get to that Oklahoma game in Dallas, there is something about Brent Venables that Steve Sarkisian just absolutely has his number. And if they can unlock some explosion in that game heading into this November slate, where they have to go to LSU, where they have to go to Missouri, where they have to go to Texas A&M, I think they can then get enough in that. If maybe they lost the Ohio State game, maybe not, and they have one loss heading into that they can go 3-1 in that stretch. Because the other team that Texas has kind of their number on is Texas A&M. But the game that I think Texas, it's at home, which will help, and I don't think they're necessarily going to have a good defense. But if Chambliss plays for Ole Miss with a Will Muschamp scheme where you're going to be heavy man, you're probably going to be 10 to 20% press man coverage, and you're going to have the secondary with their back turned to the offense. I'm sorry, there's a balloon here, and it keeps coming into our
third guest on the College Football with Sam show.
I'll move that one out of the way. It's a happy birthday balloon I got for my wife. But yeah, anyway. So Chambliss, he's so good at escaping the rush. And so much of the Will Muschamp scheme with Colin Simmons is going to be so much built on aggression for the Texas defense. And everyone saw what he did in the playoffs last year, but he was doing that all season. Like, I know you have a lot of Big Ten fans, and maybe they didn't watch the SEC games. Chambliss was doing that all year. And that is such a bad matchup for what Texas is trying to do on defense, that it will be a high scoring game, and Arch is just going to have to outscore them. But I think that's the toughest one that they have in terms of the matchup. Obviously, going to Death Valley, LSU, it will be a night game. LSU doesn't play day games at home, so that will be very, very difficult. But I think that catalyst is you get to November with only one loss. You have the OU game kind of spring you forward, and then you need to get through that November slate, or you're on the road for 3 of those games. You need to get through that November slate with only 1 loss and finish 10-2.
They're favored in all 12 of their games, right?
Yes, they will be favored in all 12. Barring something crazy happens with LSU, because that LSU game, they're on the road and it will be at night, like I said. So
Yep.
if Kiffin's unlocked this team with LSU that's blowing through their schedule and everything, then they would go into that one as an underdog. But outside of that, they're going to be favored in all their games.
All right. That we'll just have to see how it goes. I'm excited to see what you hear out of spring camp with Texas. But right now, I certainly have them as a top 2 roster. As an overall team, it's like with Texas and Oregon. I think I've texted you this 5 or more times. I'm shocked at how many people don't have one of them or even both of them in their top 3. Like, I think you have to have them top 4, if not higher than that, just because of how good their teams are. So let's segue into that with the national title odds. We have Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, Indiana, Oregon, get a drop off to Georgia, and then from there it's another drop off. From a very early look, who are your favorites to win it all and why?
So from an odd standpoint, a lot of it, I'm going to come in from an odd standpoint. I haven't done my thing yet where I'm like last year when I said I think Texas or Ohio State will win the national title. I haven't done that yet. So now I'm just looking at odds. Notre Dame is a lock to make the playoffs. So that's a decent bet. Oregon is a lock to make the playoffs. So that's a decent bet.
You've heard it here first, people.
Because there, absolutely. The Oregon schedule is easy, and the Notre Dame schedule is a joke. The Oregon schedule is easy enough to where they're a lock to make it. And the Notre Dame schedule, they only have 2 games that they potentially could lose, and if they go 10-2, they're in. So it doesn't matter. The the Oregon schedule is easy enough. They're going to go 10-2 or 11-1. Oregon is a really, really good bet for the Big Ten title because it's almost a guarantee they're going to be in Indy with the schedule that they have.
I can't believe, not to interrupt, but I cannot believe Ohio State and Indiana are ahead of them in odds. Like, that feels like a trap.
Yeah, it is. It is. So it is a trap. So as someone who bets professionally, it is a trap. So you're getting your really, really good value when it comes to that. Quite honestly, you're also good. I hate to say it, you're getting good value on Texas Tech too, because they are an absolute lock to make the playoff. And Sorsby could unlock something different. I think they're going to take a step back on defense. So if they don't have that overarching defense the way they did last year, like how much of a difference does that make? But in terms of odds, you're getting a decent one. Whoever loses the Texas and Ohio State game, you should place a bet on them as soon as they lose the game as well, because then you're going to get really good odds. So Ohio State is the sharp bet right now to win it. But we talked a little bit about this. Every year heading into the season in the 2010s, in the 20-teens, Alabama took sharp money preseason every single year. Ohio State's that new team where as long as they have Ryan Day, as long as they're playing in the Big Ten the way they are, as long as they're recruiting at the level that they're recruiting at, they're going to take sharp money preseason every single year because it makes sense, because you can just trust them. Yeah. I wouldn't take Ohio State right now at their current odds at plus 550 because that's just not good value. But if they lose that game in Austin, I'll have an Ohio State national championship ticket guaranteed. They're too good. They're too well coached, and we probably not today because we don't have enough time, but I can talk to people why the Arthur Smith hire was actually a really good hire and how it fits what they're actually trying to do. Especially when you take a look at 2021 Tennessee Titans when Vrabel was the head coach and Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator, in terms of what they did with that team to get them the #1 overall seed in the AFC when they had Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, right? So like there are things with Arthur Smith that I actually really like about the Ohio State team. So the team that and we disagreed on them all season long. You were ultimately 100% right. I don't think you're getting good value on Indiana right now, and that is again, it's a little bit of a testament to what they did what Indiana did. I still don't think like the college football public has grasped how unbelievable what Indiana did last year.
It was like if someone took over Zimbabwe and they competed with America economically within a decade.
Yes, that like it is that scale of unbelievable. It is a 14 seed, not making the Final Four, but winning the NCAA tournament and March Madness. It is one of the greatest underdog stories in the history of sports. And it is Curt Cignetti is in the category of what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State when Kansas State was they were going to shut the football program down, and then he brought them back, and they ultimately were winning conference championships. But Cignetti went and won a national title with the all-time losingest program in Power 4 history. Like they had the 72nd overall talent composite roster. I don't think people understand how unbelievable what he did is. Now they got the benefit of having some decent matchups for themselves in the playoff. Like the matchup they had against Alabama was, they could play that game 100 times. Alabama maybe wins it once. Like that matchup, they had no chance in that. They didn't actually get a matchup disadvantage until they played Miami in the national title, and they were going to lose, but they blocked the punt and they got that for a touchdown. They won the game. And again, that just goes to show like fundamentals of how Cignetti coaches his team. And sometimes you get lucky, and they put themselves in the right position to get lucky, and they were able to win the game and beat Miami. For him to do it again is the mathematical odds of that. And the team is getting more talented. The team is absolutely getting more talented. They're not going to be 72nd roster talent composite coming in this next year, but they're not going to be 10 either. Okay. Like they're still going to be in that lower tier. For him to do it again, it's to a point to where like it's almost mathematically impossible. And if he does, I'm not going to start having the Saban conversation yet, but I will have the point of saying the Meyer conversation isn't even a conversation. Like Urban Meyer and him shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath because Cignetti has distanced himself to that point. I wouldn't start putting him at the Saban point yet because Saban like almost changed the sport in terms of how dominant he was. But if he's able to do it again, he's in that tier 2 now has its own class, and there is no other argument with him. But that to being said, it's so mathematically hard for it to happen, and the schedule is different this year for Indiana than it lined up for him last year. Indiana's not good value from a national title point. So again, coming back to it from a national title point from value, I really like Oregon. I really like Notre Dame. We talked a little bit about Texas Tech. They're decent value. I don't necessarily think they can do it. Right now, I wouldn't take Ohio State. If you think Texas is going to win the Ohio State game, now is the time to take Texas. And then the last one I would give, and I will give it because of the schedule that they play, is Georgia. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about coaches here in terms of underrated, overrated. Georgia's another one that's almost I think people like don't realize Georgia's won the SEC 2 years in a row, just with the way that I'm hearing the conversation about them and like all this stuff. They're not in the same class as Oregon, Texas, or honestly, quite even Ohio State when it comes to that roster talent and what they overall have. And it's not the same thing that they had in 21 and 22 when they were dominating the Atlanta metro area for recruiting, which Atlanta Metro, DFW are the two best in recruiting in the country right now. But it's still absolutely good enough to get them into the playoff and good enough to win a national title. Again, I know Ole Miss won the game and all that stuff, but I don't know if people realize how close Georgia was last year, and I don't know if people realize how close Georgia was the year before, even with Gunnar Stockton in the Notre Dame game, where Notre Dame scored 17 points in less than 60 seconds. Like people just kind of are acting like they're a forethought, and they absolutely have fallen. They've absolutely fallen a little bit. But to think that they couldn't win a national title is just crazy. Well, and you're getting good odds
at like plus 1,000, and they're a lock to make it. Yeah. And they have top 10 returning production with a QB that fits and the schedule's easy, you have to think that this will probably be their best team since 2023 in a
Yeah.
weaker field,
Yeah.
right?
And yeah, absolutely. And again, another thing about we texted about this a couple weeks ago. Like people talk about Georgia like they haven't had a good team since 22. The Georgia team in 23 was the highest power rated team in the country. They were power rated higher than Michigan. They just didn't make there was a 4-team playoff back then, and they lost to Alabama in the SEC title, and they didn't make it. And then they absolutely obliterated Florida State, wiped them off the face of the earth, and destroyed the program. Actually, they ended Norvell's career. So and that team was loaded with NFL talent, and they were loaded with NFL talent in 24. They were loaded with NFL talent last year, and they're still loaded with NFL talent this year. Again, it doesn't have the entire Philadelphia Eagles defensive line the way the 21 and 22 teams did, but offensively, they're as good as they were probably in 23, which was their best offense up until last year. And defensively, they're going to be better than last year because they're returning so much production on the defensive side. And we talked about this a little bit last year. Mike Bobo was, if not the best offensive coordinator in college football last year, he was in the top 2 to 3. And so all those Bobo haters for so long, guys, that the offense is set up to succeed, even with the losses that they've had at wide receiver. And they're probably going to even be a little bit better on offensive line. And again, it's what you said at plus 1,000. I'm looking at Ohio State at plus 550, who may not even make it because of how difficult their schedule is. They have one of the top 2-3 most tough schedules in the country. And then you're looking at Georgia at plus 1,000, who go look at their schedule and tell me what their third loss is, because I don't see it. It's 10-2 or better. And you're going to give me almost double the odds on Georgia, who has Kirby Smart as their head coach. It's the correct value on a team to win it all.
So let's move to the overrated and underrated coaches. We talked about in a text exchange overrated coaches, but let's focus on the good stuff and the underrated coaches first.
Yeah.
Just give me a group of them, and I'll fire back with my own briefly.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start off with one, and it's gonna be a similar theme to what I gave you. As I think what I ultimately landed on is my most overrated. This coach is highly rated. I'm not saying that, okay? And it's the same. It's the same thing with when we talked about the overrated one, and I was like, I think he's very good. I'm just talking about where people haven't rated. This coach is highly rated, but I'm starting to see people have him. I'm even starting to see some people take him outside of their top 3. I'm seeing some people put him at 4, and I'm not seeing everyone unanimously have him at number 1, which is and I don't think it should. I think he's unanimously number 1. It shouldn't be a question. It's Kirby Smart. So I think Kirby Smart is one of the most underrated coaches in college football this year, because I think he is unanimously number 1. I don't put anyone else in the category. And I come back to a little bit about what we said. National championship in 21, national championship in 22, number 1 overall power rated team in 23, 24 lost his starting quarterback in the SEC title game. By the way, a game he won, came from behind and won the SEC championship. Back-to-back SEC championships in 24 and 25. College football playoff quarterfinal in 25. Came down to the wire in a game against Ole Miss where Chambliss has a Michael Penix Jr. semifinal game against Texas. Played the best game we've ever seen Chambliss play. And just consistently is delivering on all levels. And again, I still think it's lost on people. They are back-to-back SEC champions. Ohio State didn't win the Big Ten in 2024. Ohio State didn't win the Big Ten in 2025. The SEC and the Big Ten are the 2 most difficult leagues. Georgia won it in 22. They were in the SEC title game in 21. They were in the SEC title game in 23. By the way, the teams they lost to both times were still Nick Saban Alabama teams. They won it in 24. They won it in 25, and they won it in 25 28-3. So I think he's underrated because people are not in full agreement that he's the number 1 coach in college football still. I absolutely think he's number 1. And I don't really think it's a debate. And that doesn't mean I think Georgia's the best football program in the country, because I think Ohio State's the best football program in the country. We've had this conversation multiple times. Ohio State is in a level above Georgia in terms of what they can do in this current era with NIL and recruiting and all of that stuff. Georgia doesn't quite have the same power that a Texas or an Oregon, or maybe in just a tier below Texas or Oregon, Ohio State has. And yet they're still pretty dominant throughout this whole thing. And I think it's because of Kirby. And I think when Kirby leaves Georgia, you will see a very similar thing that you're seeing right now with Alabama after Nick Saban left, and how difficult it has been for them to move on and replace him. And as much as I love Ryan Day, and I think Ryan Day is top 2 head coaches in college football, I think he's number 2, because I just said I think Kirby's number 1. I don't think Ohio State would have the same fall off when Ryan Day leaves as when they bring in the next person at Ohio State, because the program is set up better to succeed.
Yeah, for Big Ten viewers, and correct me if I'm wrong, but intuitively it seems like there are probably 4 programs in the Big Ten that have like more purchasing power than Georgia does. Ohio State, USC, Oregon, and then probably Michigan you'd slot in there too.
Yeah. Maybe Michigan and Georgia are like tied. You know what I mean? Like, and they're in that same tier, but I think Michigan's a little bit above in terms of purchasing power and ability to get out there.
And that, like, for Ohio State to go 14-2 and then 12-2, and then Georgia, you're going 11-3 and 12-2, and they're very comparable factoring that in, is why I would probably give the same answer as you. My criteria is probably a bit different. So I'm like I've been drinking the Indiana Kool-Aid for 2 years, and last year it really paid off. As a little bit of a forward thinking, more recency biased rankings, I'd probably have Kirby at 2, but only because I think what Cignetti is doing is just insane.
And I could understand that, because I just got done talking about how unbelievable what they did was last year. I can completely understand that.
Yeah.
I just the
people don't understand how good Kirby is as a game manager.
Yes. Yeah. And as someone who is a graduate and a fan of a team that Kirby has owned the past 2 years, like, it's just, I've seen it like up close. Like he's just on a different like level and different wavelength when it comes to those things. And what we've talked about with the schedule, in terms of how this next year Georgia's set up with a really, really nice schedule. Go look at Georgia's schedule in 24 and 25. It was one of the hardest schedules in the country both years. To the point where in 24 he talked about it. He called out Sankey on the podium when they won the SEC championship game about, what the hell did you do to us? And they still won the SEC, and they still won it back-to-back years. And it was the schedule was so brutal in both of the years, and like, they got through it and they won the conference. And I just have so much respect for him, for the program, for when he's known to stick with a coordinator versus when he's known, hey, I should probably get, like, the Mike Bobo hate heading into the last season was at an all-time high, and he just kind of was like, no, like, I'm good. I know what I'm doing. And then they did what they did on offense last season, and Stockton had the season that he did, and they hit with all the wide receivers in the portal, all that stuff. I'm very, very high on Kirby. But then to answer the question then a little bit different, because no one thinks Kirby's not rated high. I just think that he should be number 1, and like, it shouldn't be a debate. Well, it can be a debate. But it should be agreed upon at the end of the debate that Kirby's number 1. I think, and we talked a little bit about this in terms of like, I'm going to give an answer. I'm going to give 2 answers here that I think is, and I'm purposely doing this because I think it's contradictory to a little bit what you believe. I think people have soured on Lincoln Riley too much. And that's not me saying that I think Lincoln Riley is like a top 5 or a top 10 coach. People are out here acting like the man can't coach a team, right? And and it's getting a little ridiculous with when you look at, especially on the offensive side of the ball, what he's done with the quarterback position. When you look at how many starting quarterbacks in the NFL for this next season are Lincoln Riley products, uh, I it's getting a little over the top. Okay, and it may not work out at USC. It may not, because now they got another pretty tough schedule coming up. Like in it, we'll see. I love Gary Patterson, the originator a little bit of that style of defense, that quarter style of defense that he brought to the Big 12 that gave everybody fits. I think he's phenomenal. Back in the day, especially in Big 12 Texas country, if Gary Patterson was going after a defensive back and you didn't have that defensive back on your board, you should probably reevaluate your board, because Gary Patterson knew defensive backs. We'll see how it works out. It may be a little bit past his time. If Lincoln Riley doesn't work out at USC, there is going to be a very long list of programs who are coming, calling, begging that he come be their head coach. And there will be a long list of NFL teams that want Lincoln Riley to at minimum be their offensive coordinator, and some of them that will be desperate enough that they want him to be their head coach. I think people have soured a little bit on Lincoln Riley. And then the last one, and this is the one that I know that you very much don't disagree with because you have him on the other list. I'm seeing the James Franklin hate hit a level that I think he might be a little underrated coming into this next season because
I'll listen to it.
Because of how much, like, again, people are acting like his entire career was the last season at Penn State. Okay, in the last season at Penn State, you and I are on record going into the season. Like, you asked me what was the most sure thing. I remember on the video we did preseason last year, and I was like, "Oh, it's Penn State," and you're like, "Oh, it's Penn State." Like, and it could not have been less of a sure thing, right? And ultimately, what happened? But he has an entire career in terms of what he did at Vandy and then what he did at Penn State, and the level of consistency of success that he had up until this last season. And we've talked about this. I think so much of last season had to do with psychologically what happened to that entire community program team when they lost the Oregon game, and everything had been built up to this game, to this, like, we have a whiteout, it's at night, we're the national title like contenders this year, everything, and then they didn't get it done, and they weren't quite what they were, that the team just kind of fell apart. And yes, that's on him, he's the head coach, all that stuff. But one of the people that benefited the most from Penn State taking so long to get their head coaching search done was Virginia Tech and James Franklin, because they were able to come in and swoop up tons of Penn State transfers. They were able to come in and swoop up tons of Penn State recruits that decommitted from Penn State, and then a lot of them followed him to Virginia Tech. I think people are going to be surprised at how well he does in a ACC that is prime for the taking outside of Miami because of how bad Florida State is right now. I'm not going to give the whole properly rated, like, that's the thing. I just think at this point, if you ask people to give you their top 25 head coaches, more than 50% would have him off the list of top 25. And I don't think that's right. Like, I couldn't give you 24 names or 25 names that I would pick to run a college football program before I would pick James Franklin at this point. So that's going to get a lot of hate. I know everybody's, because so many people are down on Franklin. Everyone's going to be like, Baldfather Betts, you're an idiot. I'm not taking any of your picks this year. But the you guys should, because I win a lot. But the hate that I'm seeing on Franklin just doesn't match what the actual results are. And it's so much based on what happened last season and not off of even the season before that, where he's in the Big Ten championship game and in the semifinal, one play away from going to the national title. So it just doesn't match to me. It doesn't match to me.
And I think too, even if you're lower on Franklin, say like me, for example, you have to realize how weak the ACC is, where if he just recruits at 80 or 90% of the level he did at Penn State and as the same process, they should be pretty successful in that league and be going to Charlotte pretty much every year or every other year. How much time do you think we have left? Trying to see if I can fit in one more topic or a half topic more in.
We can go 15 more. We can go 15 more.
Okay, perfect. So let's do that. I think this one will be interesting. Well, there's two options here. I think we should only do one of them. Do you want to do overrated coaches or what people seem to get wrong in the Big Ten versus SEC debate?
Ooh. Let me hit overrated coaches for 2 minutes, and then let's do the other one because the other one's super interesting. Okay.
And I have something to say after you do the overrated coaches.
Okay, so we texted about this a little bit, and I'm gonna hit this one just quickly with the same moniker that I hit the Kirby Smart one. I think this person is a fantastic coach. I just keep seeing some people putting him top 3, and a lot of people having him at 4 or 5 or something like that. And it's Marcus Freeman. Freeman is I think he's a fantastic coach. He got very lucky with the run to the national title the first time, again facing a Georgia team who lost their starting quarterback, and they were able to score 17 points in 60 seconds in a very kind of weird manner of the way that it happened. I still, to this day, people are like, the move where he ran everyone off the field and then got Georgia to jump off sides, people act like it's like the greatest thing they've ever seen in coaching. It
was a false start.
So it was okay. It was okay if it had been. I can tell you this. I can tell you why Kirby said what it was as being an SEC fan. And this is one of the issues with college football is that coaching or refereeing is different conference to conference. And the SEC, it's a false start. It is absolutely a false start. No questions asked. So there's like this. There's a lot of love for him. I like him a lot. He's probably somewhere 6 to 10. And it seems like everyone has him at lowest 6, and a lot of people have him 3 or 4 or 5. 4 is where I see a lot of people have him. So that's just a quick like one from that. The one that to the more traditional way to answer the question, we talked about the Sonny Dykes. That run that he had with TCU a few years ago, and then what people have seen with regards to his time. He was completely unsuccessful at Cal. He came into TCU. They got him on a discount, which is why they were able to hire him. He had the run in 2023 with Duggan at quarterback and a lot of very key NFL players. They took out several of the starting quarterbacks they played that year during the games. You can go back and you can look at it to where this new targeting rule that college football have actually probably would have affected that team more. Because they actually had a couple guys make it to three games where they 3 targeting penalties in one season. And I think Sonny Dykes is someone who ultimately is going to get fired from TCU. And I'm still seeing people put him in a top 25 list because of what 2023 TCU did. So I think he's up there. And then the other one that is a little bit, I think that's less debatable. I think more people would agree with me when they really start to look at it. And then the other one that I have that's a little bit more debatable, kind of like Freeman, Ferentz at Iowa. So we've talked about this before. I think Iowa, up until really last season, their success was a product of the fact that they continuously played Big Ten West quarterbacks. So I think Phil Parker got a little bit overrated due to it. I think Ferentz got a little bit overrated due to it. Ferentz is a model of consistency, which I do like. But I see some lists put him as a top 10 coach. And I think it's because they just they get to like 8 or 9 and they just don't know who else to put in it, right? And they'll put Ferentz above of Lincoln Riley, okay? If you asked NFL GMs, like athletic directors, all that stuff, like not in Iowa, because I get he's a legend inside like the Iowa community. If you ask them, hey, tomorrow you can have a new head coach and it's either going to be Kirk Ferentz or Lincoln Riley, there would be an overwhelming answer for Lincoln Riley. And again, I just kind of see this unanimous feeling of people who put him top 10 or put him top 15. I think it's because they just don't know of another name that they can put in there. And so those are the ones that I kind of have a little bit on my overrated list. And the reason that like a few people I don't put in there is because I think enough people have soured on Riley. I think enough people have soured on Franklin. I think enough people have soured on Sark, to where I don't necessarily think they're overrated anymore because people aren't putting them in those categories, those top 10 categories, those top 5 categories, those top 15 categories anymore.
Yeah. That I've seen a lot of people sour on Sark, and another one I think would be Lanning.
Yeah,
And I think that tracks with how low Oregon is in preseason odds, despite the roster they have. Is a lot of people have thought, okay, 2 blowout CFP losses, we're not going to touch you until you show us something.
if 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 you put Texas or Oregon's roster at a Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, or Kirk Cignetti team, think about how overwhelmingly those teams would be picked to win the national title.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
it would be a foregone conclusion, like 2024 Ohio State was preseason. Like it would just be a foregone conclusion.
yes,
And the thing that's so crazy too is like Dan Lanning and Steve Sarkisian are fantastic head coaches, and people are acting like they're straight liabilities, and it's crazy. It's totally crazy. Yeah, no, they haven't won national titles, and no, they're not Kirby Smart or Ryan Day or Kurt Cignetti. But Kurt Cignetti wasn't Kurt Cignetti until 2 years ago. Ryan Day wasn't Ryan Day until 2 years ago. Kirby wasn't Kirby until 2021. So like, that doesn't mean Lanning and Sark aren't going to eventually win a national title, and then all of a sudden the whole rhetoric about them will change. So
and the way that Lanning, ever since his first year, has only lost to like top tier national title teams, which is
yeah,
very similar to Day. It's very similar to Sark, more so to Smart. And then Cignetti's only 2 losses were to the teams who, went to the national title game that year. It
yeah,
does feel like that could be the next team where now they finally have the best 2 deep against anyone they play, and then they're just going to win it all because of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
I think Oregon is very live to win the national title. Very live.
yeah, that would probably be my favorite right now, but I think I want to wait until after spring to lock that in.
It's my favorite right now too, when I take into account their schedule versus Texas's schedule. It's my
Yes.
favorite as well.
Yes. They're that is an easier schedule than what I would say. I view it very similarly to Indiana's schedule, but Oregon has a better roster, so their floor is higher
Yeah,
with that same schedule.
it's a very fair statement.
I just wanted to put into context for Big Ten people relating back to Kirby Smart versus Steve Sarkisian. What Kirby Smart has done against Steve Sarkisian is like if you took Ryan Day and James Franklin, but you flipped their situations and rosters. And the inferior roster for most of those
Yes.
years is consistently circling the superior roster like
Yes.
a ship in the water surrounded by sharks. Because Texas
And
is way more money than Georgia and has had some more
and
talented players.
and they're a better team. Like, and the thing is like last season's game was in November when Texas was playing really well.
Yes.
And yes, the game was closer than the final score. Like the game was closer than 28-10. But I cannot describe to people the coaching circles that Kirby ran around Sark in last year's game. The 4th-and-1 call when, and I like, as Texas fans, we were like, no, go for it, Kirby, because we were so like we had just scored a touchdown. Our defense was doing so well. We were like, come on, like do it, mother, yeah,
Yeah.
we're. And then the play call with the slip out to the fullback in the flat, like, and he goes for like 15 yards. Then on the 3rd and 5 to get Colin Simmons to jump off sides with the hard count, and they had been baiting Colin into it all game, touchdown. And then like, I cannot explain to you the way my soul left my body when they got the onside kick, like after scoring that touchdown. And it was like, oh, we just lost the game. Because then it was 21-10. We were clicking on offense. We're like, okay, like that was a really tough drive defensively because they got the 4th-and-1. They did that 3rd and 5 offsides touchdown. But then the onside kick and how perfectly they hit, like they just nailed the execution. Is everything about it was perfect. And what they did in the SEC title game where I think Texas outgained 200 and some odd yards to 60 some odd yards at halftime in the SEC title game 2 years ago. And Georgia won. No, you described it perfectly. It would be like if Penn State had been dominating Ohio State all those years with the roster level Penn State had versus the roster level Ohio State had. Yeah, you nailed it.
That's that's unfathomable to think about, but it's what's been happening these past 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, we're past 6:30 my time. I think we can save Big Ten versus SEC for another video because that deserves like 15 or 20 minutes.
I just
Or is
want to say
there one thing you want to say?
there's one thing I want to say on it. The thing that people get wrong about it right now is how much closer it is than people think. It's the same thing people got wrong about it in the 2010s when the SEC was over the Big Ten, how much closer it was than people actually thought it was. And this they're getting wrong now is how, like, people seem to think like the Big Ten is now circles above the SEC. It's so much closer than people think. And a lot of it has had to do too with the Big Ten in the 12-team playoff has gotten all of their best teams in the playoff both years. The SEC has not, due to the way that the scheduling has happened. So like in 2024, people had this big debate about like Alabama and SMU. Alabama wasn't the other dangerous team in the SEC. It was Ole Miss. We've talked about 2024 Ole Miss, you and I, so many times. They were either the second or third best team in the country that year. It's coaching blasphemy what Lane Kiffin did to lose that game at Florida. It was Ole Miss and it was South Carolina. And especially now what you're seeing, what Eamon Worry's doing with the Seahawks in the NFL, that South Carolina team and that South Carolina defense with that defensive line was a problem for teams. And like those were the two other contenders, right? And then this last year where Oklahoma and Alabama got into the playoff, like they weren't near as good as Texas was at the end of the season. Like they had no ability to actually truly compete for anything. So yes, Georgia and Ole Miss got in, but then after that, like the right teams weren't in that. Texas A&M wasn't. Texas A&M had played a super easy schedule. Alabama and Oklahoma were dead on arrival at the end of the season due to injuries, especially with Ty Simpson in his back. The conferences are like this. In the 20 teens when the SEC was winning, the conferences were also like that. It's just the SEC had Nick Saban in Alabama. And it made it seem so much like there was so much of this distance in between them. And there's not that big of a distance in between them now, and there wasn't that big of a distance in between them back then.
That's a perfect place to end this. And I would also say too that the SEC, I don't quite know what I think of them as a whole this year, but one thing I am confident in is their top will be better than it was last year due to how much Georgia and Texas bring back and how much Texas brings in. Because last year, the SEC and power ratings will tell you this, they had a ton of top 10 and top 15 teams, but they didn't really have anyone top 5. This year, they should for sure have Texas top 5. And depending on how Georgia shakes out, they could also field the top 5 team there. For sure. Well, thank you for coming on. I love talking college football with you. This was a very enjoyable segment. And for all of you watching, make sure to subscribe to his show, check out his stuff, follow it throughout the year. I don't endorse betting, and he's probably the one exception where I'll at least tolerate it or even say, if you can follow everything he does, it would actually be a fun way to make some extra money. So go check out his stuff. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you with more guest appearances very soon.